Welcome to Histrology, where history meets royalty.
The story begins in the year 1298, in the sun-scorched lands of the Holy Land, where the Crusades carved their bloody path across deserts and cities alike. Amid the chaos of battle, a young knight knelt beneath the shadow of a crumbling fortress. His armor, darkened by soot and blood, bore the marks of campaigns that had already aged him beyond his 22 years. His hands, calloused and scarred, rested upon the hilt of a sword that had tasted the lives of both friend and foe. He had come to the Holy Land not for glory, nor for gold, but for a promise whispered to him in the shadowed halls of his order, a promise older than kingdoms, a duty that bound him to something far greater than mortal ambition. He had been chosen, though he had not understood the weight of such a calling until this very moment. The priests of his order had warned him of the peril. They spoke of sacred bloodlines, of guardians whose lives were tethered to divine purpose. The knight, however, had been filled with the fervor of youth, with the unshakable belief that courage and faith could overcome all things. And so, kneeling upon the cold stone floor of the fortress chapel, he swore an oath, a vow that would mark him forever. He swore to protect the holy bloodline entrusted to his order. Not for fame, not for recognition, but for the preservation of something sacred, something eternal. The words left his lips with the weight of destiny itself, and as he spoke, a chill seemed to descend upon the chapel, a whisper of warning carried on a wind that no man could see. He felt it immediately, the subtle shift in the world around him. A shadow, not of the fortress, not of any man, passed across the walls. It was as if time itself had paused to mark the significance of his vow. In that instant, the young knight understood what the priests had meant. The oath he had taken was not merely a promise, it was a binding, a tether to the ages that would not allow him the relief of death. The first years after his vow were consumed by war. Cities fell and rose, kings died and were replaced, but the knight remained. He became a figure of whispered legend among soldiers and civilians alike. Some claim to have seen him in the heat of battle, armor gleaming even when all others were covered in soot, moving with a precision that defied the exhaustion of war. Others spoke of a silent figure standing on the ramparts of besieged cities, watching, waiting, protecting in ways that seemed almost supernatural. By the year 1320, the knight had earned a name among those who feared and revered him, though it was never spoken aloud. He was called the Shadow of the Crusade, the Guardian in Black, a figure whose presence alone could turn the tide of battle. Yet despite the fear he inspired in enemies and the awe he commanded among allies, he remained ever solitary. He formed no attachments, claimed no lands, and sought no reward. His life belonged entirely to the oath he had taken centuries ago. Legends began to spread of the knight's encounters far beyond the battlefield. In the quiet villages along the Mediterranean, farmers spoke of a cloaked figure appearing at night to prevent disasters. A marauding band of thieves stopped by a sudden and inexplicable force. A fire that would have consumed a granary snuffed out without explanation. Crops that flourished despite famine. He was seen, they said, and then he was gone, leaving only the memory of a shadow and the glimmer of metal beneath moonlight. Rumors carried further across the lands of Europe. During the 100 Years' War, accounts emerged of a black-armored knight appearing on the fields of Crécy and Agincourt, altering the outcomes of battles in ways that could not be attributed to mortal soldiers alone. Eyewitnesses spoke of his eyes that had witnessed centuries of suffering, yet burned with unyielding resolve. It was said that he never spoke, yet the men who saw him felt guided, as if an unseen hand directed their actions in moments of desperation. Throughout these decades, he endured the physical ravages of life and war, yet his body seemed untouched by age. Wounds healed unnaturally fast, fatigue held no dominion over him, and the passage of time left no mark upon his form. Scholars and mystics whispered that the knight had been cursed or blessed by forces beyond understanding. Some believed he had been granted immortality by God himself, a guardian to endure until the bloodline he swore to protect could no longer be threatened. Others feared he had been condemned to wander the earth, unable to find peace, a living shadow of eternal duty. Despite these accounts, little was written in the chronicles of kings and priests. The knight did not seek recognition, and the historians who might have recorded his deeds found only fragments, glimpses, and rumors. Yet even as history marched onward, wars ended, dynasties rose and fell, his presence persisted, an unbroken thread woven into the fabric of centuries. Stories of encounters became more vivid with the passing of time. In northern France, a village besieged by mercenaries claimed that a lone knight appeared atop the battlements during the night, wielding a sword that glimmered with an unearthly light. The attackers fled in terror, leaving the villagers unharmed. In England, a chronicler recorded the sudden arrival of a black-armored figure during the Wars of the Roses, someone who intervened in skirmishes with impossible skill, vanishing before anyone could approach. Even in modern times, the legend persisted. Soldiers in the trenches of World War I spoke of a mysterious man who appeared during moments of dire peril, seemingly appearing from nowhere, guiding troops, and vanishing as quickly as he had arrived. Some photographs taken during conflicts showed blurred shapes in the background, figures in armor that resembled medieval crusaders, prompting speculation that the knight's curse or blessing had endured into the present day. Yet, for all the tales, he remained unseen by the masses, a myth to be whispered only among those who had glimpsed him. His existence was a question mark in history, a shadow threading through centuries, neither fully proven nor entirely dismissed. It was said that he moved without desire, without ambition, sustained solely by the oath he had taken centuries before. The knight was a guardian of secrets, of bloodlines, of a promise older than the kingdoms that rose and fell around him. As the 14th century progressed, the knight's appearances became more selective, more purposeful. Battles where the fate of nations hung by a thread saw his presence. Wars between kingdoms, the sieges of cities, the defense of the innocent, all became stages where the guardian acted in silence. Those who survived encounters with him never spoke lightly of it. They remembered the weight of centuries in his gaze, the relentless persistence of someone who could not rest until his duty was fulfilled. And yet, even amidst this extraordinary existence, there was a solitude to his life that no legend could fully convey. He formed no attachments, watched loved ones perish, and witnessed the endless march of human ambition and folly. His oath had granted him immortality, but at the cost of belonging, of rest, of the simple solace that mortal men knew. He was a sentinel, a shadow cast over the ages, and he would continue to walk this earth as long as the bloodline he protected remained in jeopardy. The first chapter of his story closes in the deserts of the Levant, as he rides under a pale moon, a solitary figure against the vast open sands. The knights of his era would age and die. Empires would crumble, yet he rides still, bound by a vow older than kings, by a promise that even death could not claim. Somewhere, beyond the horizon, the whispers begin to spread once more, into the villages, the towns, and the cities of Europe. The knight who never died had begun his long journey, and the shadow of his legend would stretch far into the centuries to come, shaping the fates of men and the outcome of wars, unseen yet always present, eternal yet isolated. It is here that the first glimpse of the immortal guardian ends, his origins laid bare, his oath sealed in blood, and the world only beginning to understand the weight of a knight who could never truly die. The knight had survived centuries, and as the 14th century waned, Europe was plunged into new conflicts, ripe with blood, ambition, and unrelenting chaos. The 100 Years' War erupted between England and France, a prolonged struggle that would stretch decades, claiming the lives of thousands and reshaping kingdoms. Amid these wars, the immortal knight emerged again, unseen yet unmistakably present, a phantom shadow threading through the carnage. He appeared on the battlefields at Crécy in 1346, where arrows darkened the skies and men fell by the thousands. Chroniclers recorded a strange sight: a lone figure in black armor moving through the chaos, cutting paths for the desperate, standing where no man could stand, wielding a sword as if it were an extension of his will. To those who saw him, he was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Soldiers whispered that the knight seemed invulnerable, his body untouched by arrows or swords, his endurance unmatched. In the days that followed, tales of his interventions spread. In the villages near the Somme, terrified peasants claimed that crops were spared from pillage, that fires set by marauders mysteriously went out, and that lost children were returned unharmed. The Shadow, they called him, a being who existed between life and legend, whose presence signified salvation or doom. Yet no one knew who he truly was, nor did they dare approach him. He moved alone, a sentinel whose duty was not to be understood, but to be fulfilled. As the war dragged on, the knight became more than a battlefield legend. Across Europe, kings and generals noted impossible victories, strange interventions, and inexplicable outcomes. A French captain reported seeing a man in black armor appear on the walls of Calais during a night siege, holding off attackers single-handedly. By the morning, the knight had vanished, leaving behind only the echo of his presence and soldiers who swore on pain of death to never speak of it lightly. The knight's existence was a secret to the masses, but an open whisper among those who survived his encounters. Letters between commanders spoke of a guardian from the past, a soldier who seemed to embody centuries of warfare experience, whose presence inspired courage beyond natural limits. Some even wrote that the knight carried a banner, black, with a faintly shimmering emblem, the meaning of which was lost to time, though it was rumored to be the mark of his sacred oath. In the quiet moments between battles, the knight would often vanish from the battlefield entirely, wandering the towns and monasteries of Europe. He would sit among the monks, silent and distant, watching as the centuries passed, observing history unfold with an eternal patience. In Italy, he was spotted in the courts of Florence during political upheavals, a silent witness to conspiracies that would shape the Renaissance. Merchants, nobles, and scholars all claimed glimpses of him, yet none could approach him or comprehend his purpose fully. By the late 14th century, stories of the knight became intertwined with myths of divine intervention. Some chroniclers, seeking to rationalize the impossible, suggested that he was an angelic warrior sent by God, bound to the earth to protect humanity from itself. Others whispered that he had been cursed by the same priests who had witnessed his oath, condemned to wander eternally, a guardian who could never rest, never sleep, never know peace. His appearances were not limited to Europe alone. Merchants, traveling to the Levant and the Mediterranean islands, reported sightings along trade routes, near castles, and even aboard ships. Sailors swore that a black armored figure would appear during storms, guiding vessels safely to harbor or warning of approaching pirates. Tales spread from port to port, crossing borders, languages, and cultures. Though the details varied, the essence of the story remained. A knight who could not die, bound by an oath older than kings themselves. One particularly haunting story emerged from the Siege of Orléans in 1429, during the chaos of the 100 Years' War. As French forces struggled against the English, villagers claimed that a solitary knight appeared on the city's walls, moving with uncanny precision, rallying the troops, and intervening in skirmishes at key moments. No one knew his identity, yet every French soldier who witnessed him described a silent determination, a presence that seemed to channel centuries of battle wisdom. Some insisted that he was a precursor to Joan of Arc, an unseen guardian ensuring that history would unfold in a certain way. In these years, the knight's legend began to adopt a darker, more mysterious tone. Witnesses described him with details that defied explanation: eyes that burned like embers beneath his helmet, armor that seemed impervious to fire or steel, and movements that were swift, precise, and utterly inhuman. Rumors suggested that he could appear and vanish at will, crossing vast distances in moments, yet always returning to the cause that bound him, the protection of the sacred bloodline he had sworn to defend centuries ago. As the knight endured the 15th century, Europe transformed. The Renaissance began to awaken art, science, and philosophy, yet war never truly ended. Feuds between city-states, dynastic battles, and crusades in the eastern Mediterranean provided ample stages for the guardian to manifest. Artists, scribes, and scholars occasionally recorded glimpses of him, vague sketches in margins of manuscripts, cryptic descriptions in letters, the shadow of a man whose presence was fleeting but undeniable. Despite the grandeur and transformation of European society, the knight remained unchanged. He moved through centuries like a ghost tethered to a singular purpose. For him, time was not measured by the rise and fall of kings, nor by the passing of seasons, but by the preservation of the bloodline he had sworn to guard. He intervened where history demanded, yet he never sought recognition, never claimed reward. He existed solely for duty, and in that duty, he was both immortal and alone. Even the common folk came to fear and revere him. In the forests of France and the hills of England, peasants whispered of the black-armored knight who appeared in moments of great need. Some described him as terrifying, others as comforting. One tale recounts a child lost in the woods who emerged unharmed, claiming a knight had guided them safely home, a figure whose eyes glowed faintly in the dark, whose voice was never heard, whose presence was only felt. By the 16th century, as Europe plunged into religious wars and the Reformation, the knight's appearances became more selective, almost cryptic. No longer did he intervene in every battle. Instead, he appeared at moments that seemed to carry deeper significance. In the sieges and uprisings that rocked cities, he was seen silently standing upon walls, watching the tide of history with eyes that had witnessed centuries of human ambition and folly. His presence was a reminder that the oath he had sworn transcended time, transcended politics, and even transcended mortality itself. Stories also began to emerge of encounters beyond the battlefield. In isolated villages, farmers and clergy described seeing a figure in black armor, standing silently at crossroads or atop hills, observing the world with an inscrutable gaze. Travelers reported fleeting glimpses along trade routes, on ferries crossing rivers, and even in markets, always watching, always present, yet never engaging. Those who encountered him spoke of an aura of inevitability, a weight of history that pressed down upon them, leaving them changed, as if they had touched the edge of eternity. Even as centuries passed, rumors of his survival persisted. During early modern wars, letters, diaries, and court documents occasionally mentioned a black-armored figure who appeared at critical moments. In the Battle of Pavia, some soldiers claimed to see a knight moving silently among the ranks, turning the tide with actions that seemed almost prophetic. In Venice, merchants reported a cloaked figure protecting the city from unseen dangers. In Spain, during conflicts against invading forces, witnesses described a solitary knight guiding troops with uncanny precision. Through all of this, the knight remained bound by his oath. He did not age, he did not tire, he did not falter. His existence was a paradox, a man alive yet beyond life, a guardian of history who could neither die nor rest. The centuries passed around him, yet he endured, his purpose unchanged. The legend of the immortal guardian grew, intertwined with the myths of Europe, whispered across generations, yet always shrouded in secrecy. By the end of Part 2, the knight had become more than a figure of legend. He was a force woven into the very fabric of history. Battles, sieges, and political upheavals all bore his mark in subtle ways, a silent hand guiding events to preserve what he had sworn to protect. The shadow of the knight stretched across the centuries, a reminder that some oaths bind the soul beyond death, and that some guardians will endure long after the world has forgotten their names. The story of the knight's shadowed path across Europe had only begun. The centuries ahead would see him witness empires rise and fall, revolutions erupt, and technology transform the battlefield, yet his eternal vigil continued, unwavering. And as the world approached the modern age, the question lingered. Would the immortal guardian finally be seen not as a shadow of legend, but as a witness to history itself? As the 16th century gave way to the 17th, Europe changed in ways the knight could scarcely have imagined. Kingdoms expanded, dynasties clashed, and religion tore nations apart. Yet amidst all the upheaval, one constant remained: the black-armored figure whose vow bound him beyond death. The immortal guardian continued his silent watch, appearing only when history demanded his presence. In France, during the Wars of Religion, whispers of a mysterious knight surfaced again. Protestants and Catholics alike spoke of a man in black armor who appeared on battlefields, silently shifting the course of skirmishes. At Orléans, where blood and fire threatened entire towns, the villagers claimed that a lone knight, moving like a shadow, deflected disaster. He never fought for glory, nor for either faction. His allegiance was to the sacred bloodline alone, and to that end, he intervened wherever the threat arose. Meanwhile, the world itself began to accelerate. Trade, exploration, and the rise of empires changed the landscape of war. The knight adapted as much as a timeless figure could, moving through forests, mountains, and seas, always present yet unseen by most. On naval battles in the Mediterranean, sailors swore they glimpsed a man in armor standing on storm-tossed decks, warning captains of peril, guiding ships to safety. In the New World, conquistadors reported fleeting shadows among the ruins of indigenous cities, as if the knight's purpose extended far beyond Europe. By the 18th century, the knight had become less of a human soldier and more of a myth entwined with the consciousness of those who lived through conflict. Accounts of his presence became increasingly fragmented, appearing in private journals, letters, and memoirs. An officer in the 7 Years' War wrote of a figure who moved along the battlefield at impossible speed, appearing where bullets struck most dangerously, invisible to most, yet undeniably present to those he chose. He left no mark upon the land, no name in official records, yet the people who saw him understood one truth. The guardian of the sacred bloodline still walked among them. Even as time progressed into the 19th century, the industrial age did not diminish his presence. Battles grew larger, the machines of war more destructive, yet the knight remained, adapting to the changing face of human violence. In the Napoleonic Wars, soldiers claimed to have glimpsed a black-armored figure standing atop hills, directing skirmishes or silently riding through the chaos, as if centuries of experience gave him the ability to foresee danger before it arrived. In photographs taken by early photographers near conflict zones, some argued that faint figures in the background resembled the knight, though skeptics dismissed these as mere shadows or double exposure. Despite the technological and social transformations of the modern era, the knight's existence continued to straddle the line between history and myth. Letters from the Crimean War describe an officer who, during the siege of Sevastopol, observed a solitary knight, immovable amidst cannon fire, his armor intact, eyes gleaming beneath the helmet. Soldiers swore they were not hallucinating, yet when relief forces arrived, no trace of him remained. It became clear he existed for a purpose beyond recognition, a duty defined not by human understanding but by sacred obligation. The 20th century would push the legend further into the realm of the almost unbelievable. During World War I, soldiers in the trenches claimed fleeting glimpses of a black-armored figure moving with impossible agility. His appearance was brief, often at moments of life-or-death crisis, yet survivors remembered him vividly. Accounts described a man seemingly untouched by bullets, explosions, or gas, guiding men to safety with a silent authority. Many dismissed the stories as folklore, but letters, diaries, and photographs from the era preserved the whispers. Some images contained blurred figures resembling medieval armor, a haunting echo of a past thought long gone. In the Second World War, whispers persisted. Pilots, infantrymen, and correspondents across Europe spoke of a shadowy knight who appeared on battlefields and bombed cities, sometimes observed standing atop ruined walls or moving through the chaos as if centuries of experience made him untouchable. A soldier in France recounted an encounter with a figure who warned him of incoming artillery before it struck, vanishing immediately afterward. Many dismissed the claims as wartime hysteria, yet the pattern of sightings mirrored centuries of earlier reports. The knight's presence had transcended legend, weaving into the reality of modern conflict. Throughout all these centuries, the knight remained loyal to his ancient oath. The sacred bloodline he had sworn to protect was never explicitly named, yet his intervention suggested its importance. Wars were prevented from spiraling into catastrophe, dynasties preserved, and key individuals guided toward survival. His existence was paradoxical. unseen yet influential, immortal yet forever alone, a witness to human ambition, cruelty, and occasional heroism. As the modern world advanced into the late 20th century, the sightings of the knight took on a new dimension. Photographs and amateur videos captured fleeting images of a figure in black armor during moments of crisis, natural disasters, civil unrest, and conflict zones. Analysts, historians, and skeptics debated endlessly. Were these coincidences, misinterpretations, or the continuation of a centuries-old guardian? The legend had grown too consistent, too persistent, to dismiss entirely. Yet alongside admiration and awe, a darker aspect of his existence emerged. The knight was not merely a protector, he was a warning. Wherever he appeared, danger was imminent. Battles, disasters, or political upheavals followed. Some believed he existed not to change history, but to ensure that certain events occurred exactly as fate demanded. He was an agent of inevitability, a living shadow whose presence signaled the delicate balance of history being maintained. Reports of sightings became global. In Asia, during conflicts in Korea and Vietnam, soldiers claimed to see a figure clad in black armor moving through jungles and ruins, appearing at moments of critical decision. His presence was fleeting but unmistakable, and in each account, the knight remained focused, never interacting unnecessarily, always observing, always guarding. By now, the legend had grown to encompass more than European bloodlines. It had become a timeless symbol, a shadow tethered to the fate of humanity itself. Through wars, revolutions, and the rise of technology, the knight endured. He was seen in photographs that defied explanation, in diaries that hinted at his intervention, and in the memories of those who survived encounters with him. To the modern observer, he was a ghost, a myth, or a relic of imagination. Yet for those who had seen him, there was no doubt. He was real. A living sentinel whose existence spanned centuries, an eternal guardian of a promise older than any kingdom, older than recorded history. By the end of Part 3, the knight had become more than legend. He was an eternal witness to the unfolding of human history, an invisible hand guiding events from behind the veil of time. His immortality was not a gift of comfort, but a relentless duty, and his existence posed questions that haunted those who pondered them. How many centuries had he endured? How many wars had he influenced? And ultimately, was there a conclusion to his vigil? Or was the immortal guardian destined to continue his solitary path until the end of days? The stage was set for the final chapter. The centuries of observation, intervention, and unending vigilance would culminate in a confrontation, a revelation of his purpose, and the resolution of the centuries-old oath. The world had grown, changed, and evolved, but the knight remained timeless, unyielding, and bound to a sacred mission that would soon reach its ultimate test. By the dawn of the 21st century, the world had changed in ways unimaginable to the young knight of the 14th century. Skyscrapers pierced the clouds, engines roared across continents, and weapons of unimaginable destruction could end thousands of lives in an instant. Yet despite the transformation of humanity, the immortal guardian remained unchanged. His vow, sealed in blood centuries ago, tethered him to a mission that no advance of technology, no evolution of society, could nullify. The centuries had honed his awareness, his perception, and his understanding of the fragile web of human history. Where others saw chaos, he saw patterns. Where others perceived inevitability, he intervened subtly, often unseen, ensuring that the sacred bloodline he had sworn to protect endured through calamities. He was both observer and guardian, a shadow moving through the modern world, a relic of time, yet acutely aware of the stakes that had never truly diminished. It was in the early decades of the new millennium that the true test of his existence emerged. A secret cabal, centuries in the making, had begun to target the bloodline, pursuing influence through politics, finance, and clandestine operations. Their aim was subtle yet precise: to destabilize nations and reshape history itself. Where centuries before threats had been armies and sieges, now they were corporations, covert organizations, and networks of power operating in shadows. Yet the knight recognized them for what they were: a threat to the sacred promise he had sworn to uphold. He moved silently across continents, tracing their influence, observing patterns of corruption, greed, and violence. Cities in Europe, the Americas, and Asia became stages for his intervention, though rarely was he seen by those he sought to protect. His methods were as subtle as they were decisive, preventing accidents, redirecting events, exposing plots before they could culminate. Occasionally, a fleeting glimpse of him appeared in photographs, an unaccountable shadow in military intelligence photos, a blurred figure in security footage, but such images were dismissed as anomalies, part of the natural skepticism of the modern era. In the midst of this vigilance, there was a moment that mirrored the ancient battles he had endured centuries ago. A clandestine operation threatened to eliminate key figures of the bloodline. It was precise, calculated, and potentially catastrophic. The knight, understanding the gravity, acted with a determination born of centuries of experience. He intercepted the operatives, leaving subtle evidence of their failure without revealing himself. Those targeted survived, often attributing their fortune to chance, providence, or luck. But the knight knew better. The centuries-old oath had not been in vain. Yet this final threat brought with it something new: reflection. For the first time in nearly 7 centuries, he considered the cost of his immortality. He had witnessed countless deaths, lost allies, watched nations rise and fall, and endured endless solitude. His body remained untouched by time, but his mind carried the weight of countless lifetimes. The oath had preserved the bloodline, but it had also bound him in isolation, rendering him a silent witness to the passage of humanity. As the threat subsided, the knight moved to a quiet location far from prying eyes. He reflected on the centuries: the Crusades, the 100 Years' War, the Renaissance, the Industrial Age, 2 World Wars, and the modern era of technology and globalization. Each era had tested his resolve, yet he had remained steadfast. Now, having preserved the sacred bloodline against an unprecedented modern threat, he contemplated the finality of his mission. Was immortality a gift, or merely the relentless repetition of duty without end? It was then that a subtle change occurred. The centuries of intervention had accumulated, not only in history but in the spiritual balance of the world. Some scholars might have called it destiny, others divine providence. The knight felt, almost as if for the first time, the threads of his existence loosening. The sacred oath that had bound him to the mortal realm had been fulfilled. The bloodline was secure. The threats had been neutralized. A sense of closure, rare and profound, washed over him. He stood on the edge of a cliff, overlooking a modern city bathed in twilight. The wind carried the hum of humanity: vehicles, voices, distant sirens, a tapestry of civilization that had grown beyond the wars of his past. For centuries, he had observed this evolution from the shadows, guiding, protecting, and influencing unseen. Now he allowed himself a moment of clarity, a recognition of the immense span of time he had endured, and the countless lives he had silently touched. With deliberate motion, he removed his helmet, revealing a face that bore no trace of age, no indication of the centuries endured. His eyes, deep and unwavering, reflected both the sorrow and the hope of countless generations. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the weight of mortality approaching, not as an end of life, but as a release from duty. He had been the guardian, the eternal shadow, and now his watch could end. And yet, even as the possibility of rest approached, there remained one final act. He took a small, intricately carved object from beneath his armor, a token, a symbol of his vow. He left it in a secure location, hidden from the world yet meant to endure, a tangible reminder of the oath that had guided him through centuries. Then, quietly, he walked into the twilight, disappearing from sight. Not a whisper remained, not a shadow left behind. For a brief moment, the centuries of legend converged into silence. The immortal knight, the guardian of sacred blood, had fulfilled his purpose. His presence had shaped history, preserved life, and ensured the continuity of a lineage whose significance was both sacred and enduring. And now, finally, he was free. Though history would remember him in fragments, through rumors, legends, and unexplained phenomena, no one would ever know the full truth. He was the shadow in the chronicles, the phantom in the photographs, the unseen hand guiding the course of humanity. And with the fulfillment of his vow, the knight who never died had vanished, leaving behind only the echoes of a presence that had endured for centuries. Somewhere in the modern world, an observant historian might uncover the faint traces of his interventions, a pattern too deliberate to be coincidence. Others might dismiss the stories as myth. Yet the truth would remain, timeless and eternal. A knight had walked the earth for centuries, bound by an oath, immortal in duty, and at last, released from the weight of eternity. The legend ends not with death, for he was never truly mortal, but with completion. The bloodline he protected endured, history flowed unbroken, and the shadow that had lingered for centuries finally faded into memory. The world continued, unaware of the silent guardian who had walked among them. But the echoes of his vigil persisted, a reminder that some promises, some oaths are older than time, and some guardians endure far beyond the reach of mortality.